Welcome to Prepared for Parenthood, the podcast for hopeful, expectant, and new parents with little ones up to age 5, as well as the professionals who work with them. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Dueger, a psychotherapist, author, educator, parent coach, and married mother of 2. On this show, we'll discuss everything from the most up-to-date practicals of best supporting your young children, to thriving in relationship as a family, to more surprising topics around the psychology and development of babies and children from conception through age 5. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm thrilled to have you here today. Welcome back to Prepared for Parenthood. I am so thrilled today to have our guest, Dr. Susan Highsmith, with us. She's an author, educator, counselor, and she also supported me while I was writing my dissertation many years ago. So I have a special affinity for Susan. Susan's an octogenarian, and she has earned several degrees, a PhD with a specialty in prenatal and perinatal psychology, a doctorate of divinity, and a master's degree in counseling and guidance. She's a prolific author. She's published 9 books that span the course of a lifetime. The Renaissance of Birth, Changing the Language of Childbirth, which is a primer introducing readers to the basics of prenatal and perinatal psychology. A series of 4 fairy tales titled The First Fairy Tale Books 1 through 4 that symbolically deal with conception, the formation of the heart, the development of the senses, and childbirth, each designed to be read to babies in utero. And most recently, Girls, Goddesses, and Growing Up, to enhance young women's self-esteem and help them overcome limiting patterns that they may have taken on. So welcome, Susan. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you, Stephanie.
So I just want to share a little bit, and I may have shared this on earlier podcasts, but just as you're speaking to the piece of hopeful parents, inviting a baby in, I know that sometimes, like you said, babies arrive on their own terms and they were unexpected. But in my own journey and our journey as a family, our first arrived really easily without much planning. And then it took quite a while for us to conceive a second child. And we were at a point of wondering if that was going to happen. I remember having these lucid dreams, which was new for me, where this baby was coming to me. And I checked in with this baby like, hey, when are you coming? Are you coming? What's happening? And this baby said, Mom, you and Dad are so stressed out. I can't get down there right now. And it was such a wake-up call for me because she was right on. She showed up and was really clear, like, get it together so I can get down there or I can't arrive. And then she would show up on my husband's side of the bed and I'd hear her voice, Mommy. At that point, I thought it was our first daughter in her own room. I was listening through the monitor and I'd go to check on her and she'd be asleep. And I was like, that's really interesting. What's happening? And I was like, oh, it's this new being trying to arrive. And then she arrived on my side of the bed and I felt this poke on me in the middle of the night. And she said, Mommy. And then she just started laughing. And I said, oh, I'm pregnant. It was way too early to know that I was pregnant, but I was. And so a couple of weeks later, I confirmed that I was pregnant. Having those kinds of experiences, I've heard this is not unusual. I hear this from a lot of parents, mostly women. And I think there's a thinner veil between the worlds when you're pregnant or trying to be pregnant. And so these beings that are coming in, wherever they come from, have sort of a way of arriving, showing up in their fairy tale. There's a lot of science in it, but it's pretty miraculous. It's pretty out of our realm of really being able to understand what exactly is happening, because these beings come in and yes, these are biological beings on the planet, but they're so much bigger than that, right? We're all so much bigger than that.
Yeah.
So bringing that experience, whether your baby was expected or a surprise, and bringing that consciousness in, like you're speaking to, let's make the transition onto the planet as easy as we can and our lives together as connected and loving as we can make it. I just love that piece. And I love hearing from parents all the ways that they connect before baby even arrives. Often babies will show up. The spirit of the baby, or however you want to think of it, shows up and lets the parents know, hey, I'm here. On some level, I'm already here. It's a very beautiful experience, I think.
Stephanie, that's a magnificent story. Thank you for sharing that. I really would love for mommies to share these kinds of stories. Often what we do is it's a top that. Let me tell you how bad my pregnancy was, how awful the birth was, how I didn't get the care that I needed, goes on and on. And that's an energy field in itself that encourages women to focus on what's all wrong as opposed to what's right. And
Hmm.
these stories of acknowledging the spirit that is coming into a physical body. And there are many people who have said this. Wayne Dyer was one who said, we are spiritual beings having a physical experience, not physical beings having a spiritual experience. It's a different way of sort of turning on our heads to consider the fact that we are extraordinary beings beyond what we see in the physical. And these communications with the babies can be through just quiet time. It can be just the partners holding hands and reflecting on there's a baby coming and just listening, just waiting. Of course, prayer and meditation and all those various spiritual traditions also work exceedingly well. But babies know when they are welcomed, and it can make everything a lot easier. When we are acknowledging the consciousness of that baby, and I'm using consciousness in a very broad sense now, because I believe there's consciousness in everything. The universe knows what it's doing. Essentially, the planets are not colliding with one another. There's some sort of universal plan that keeps everything together. And when we look at perhaps our physical and our political situation, we might question that plan exists because things are so very trying. But where does that come from? And that's one of the reasons I wrote the last book that I did. Young women have their self-esteem sabotaged all the way along because we live in a patriarchal world right now. We do. And in that world, we are not celebrated in the way that you and I are talking about, Stephanie, about these beautiful souls coming in, this gorgeous daughter who was already speaking to you, saying, Mom, calm down. I really want to come through. And as soon as that happens, she shows up.
I want to add, Susan, just to our listeners, if maybe you've had a challenging birth experience, or you had a baby that you weren't expecting was going to arrive, or your baby had a difficult time, what we're speaking to is not meant to make anyone feel badly if they didn't have the birth experience or the pregnancy that they would have hoped for. So if you had a challenging birth experience where you're like, wow, I came out maybe kind of traumatized from this experience, and maybe baby as well, please know that there are so many of us out there who can help you process that and help your baby process that, so that from here on out, your experience can completely shift. You don't have to live with that for a lifetime. Your child does not have to live with that experience for a lifetime. We can help integrate and heal those more challenging experiences and help you and your baby and your whole family have a more loving experience where you're feeling connected. And just know that whatever experience you had on some level, it's meant to help guide you, and maybe it'll help guide you to get the support that you need to make all of this easier for yourself and your baby. So please know that there's no judgment around the kind of birth that you had, or if it was challenging, or if, you weren't expecting to be pregnant. It's all welcome. We're all learning as we go along.
Indeed. Thank you. I think that is a fabulous sharing. And with your permission, I'll tell one very personal story. I mentioned that getting my PhD was important to me because it was not just about getting a degree. It was about making sense out of my own life. And I believe that everything, good and particularly stressful, or what we would label as not so good, is important to what our life learnings are. I was 16 when I got pregnant the first time, and I married the young man, which was an interesting turn of events. I said he loved me, and I was thrilled. We got married, and at 17, I gave birth to my first child. I went on and had a second child before I was 20. And I had asked myself a lot about, why did I let that happen? What was my role in all of this? It was not anything that was orchestrated by anybody else other than me. And what did I do with that information? It has led me to, now that I am a great grandmother, wanting to make sure that my daughter and then my granddaughters, of whom I have 5, did not have the same experience that I did. When my pregnancies, the first one occurred, and even the second, there was no Roe versus Wade. There isn't again. And so women are having to face these experiences with a new mindset. What are they going to do? How are they going to do it? And it's challenging. It's very challenging. But what I wanted to do was called turning my lemons into lemonade. How could I not just share my feelings about this, but explore them in a way that I could heal, that I could help my own 2 children, that I could move on through the generations and recognize that there's a huge audience out there. There are right now around 3.5 million babies born in the United States every year. What do these precious women need to know? How can we support them? What can we do to say, okay, this has happened for you. How do you want to share this experience? I can tell you, when I was 16, Stephanie, I thought no one will ever know. I will never tell this story. Now it is fundamental to the work that I do in my life. In our society, 16 is very young to get pregnant. Particularly in those days, it was called out of wedlock. Now, not so much. Many women are attempting to get pregnant without having a partner that will be around to support them, because they feel that having a child is so important to them. Having the partner is not as important. How do we, as wisdom keepers, women who are my age, for example, help share our experience in a really authentic way that says, I've been through a lot, and I'd love to share what works, what I have learned, and how can I support you? What would you like first? And may I offer something else that you might not have thought of, which is where my books have gone.
Mm. I love that term, the wisdom keepers. I think often in this society don't do a great job of honoring the different phases of life
True.
and honoring the amazing wisdom that someone in their 80s, the life experience and the way that you see the world is expanded compared to people in their 20s. They're having very different experiences. We can learn so much from the elder generations about how things have changed, how they see the world, all of that. So thank you for continuing to bring your wisdom onto the planet.
Well,
Susan, can you speak a little bit about reading to babies in the NICU in particular?
oh, yes. I'm so happy that you helped us segue into that. The newer research is showing that babies who are born prematurely, and there are a lot of them, are still fetuses. They may be 21 and 22 weeks old, gestational age, and they survive. But what do they need? And what we are finding is that some enlightened folks in hospitals, Mayo Clinic, the University of California at San Diego has a fabulous hospital in La Jolla, and they're reading to these babies in the NICU. And so what I'm saying is, if they're finding that it is helpful in a neonatal intensive care unit, would it not be wise for a mommy who is carrying this precious little one to also read to the baby while it's still in utero? And it just makes a lot of sense. That environment that the babies are born into can be stressful in itself. There's a lot of light, a lot of sound. There's nurses who are very busy, and therefore they may or may not get back to the baby to feed it. Babies, newborns, need to get sustenance every 20 minutes to 2 hours. The standard has been for a long time, feed them every 4 hours. The baby does not have a sense of time. And therefore, if it's not getting fed, it thinks it will die. And we carry this pattern subconsciously, this implicit pattern in literally at the cell level for a lifetime. So it leads to obesity, it leads to overeating, it leads to self-soothing through drugs, through alcohol. It does all kinds of things to our psyches to help us overcome this fear that we're not going to be fed or cared for in some way. There's so much to learn. You and I have been studying this stuff for well over 20 years now. And I began even earlier than that through some of the studies that I was doing with a psychologist who was also a spiritual teacher. And I could see everything I read and all these stories that I hear validate how early these impressions are made upon us and how we can correct those things that are not working or did not work. Do you know Tony Madrid's work?
I
He has
do.
some phenomenal things to help women envision, simply use the power of sort of a dreamlike state to create a new birth for their baby. And what happens is the child who is not even there in the session will have their asthma cleared up. It's incredible that wonderful, easy processes that are directed at correcting any difficulties that may have occurred and also preventing them, which is where we started with this, is if we can start early by reading, for example, let's do that. The research on just reading, not to a baby in utero, but reading, is that it is powerfully relaxing. It's better than drinking a cup of tea. It's better than taking a bath. It's amazing what it will do. Well, if mommy calms down, if mommy is relaxed, baby is also relaxed. And then all the benefits that occur through the bonding that is enhanced by starting early. Don't wait until the baby's in arms. Begin now to say, I love you. I'm here for you. I would like this to go as easily as possible. If you have reflections and things that you want to share, I'm open. I'm listening. All of these ways that mommies and daddies can connect with the baby ahead of time.
And think about the implications of, for example, Tony Madrid's work, not just for babies, but for all life forms, right? If we take that same information into ourselves, like what was the birth that I wish that I had had myself coming into the world? The idea that we can actually change what's happening on a biological level by what we are digesting intellectually, spiritually, however you want to envision it, impacts what happens to us on the planet. It's pretty mind boggling, I think, and fascinating.
I love where your mind goes. You are ahead of me all the way. It's just amazing, Stephanie. Yes.
We've been speaking today with Dr. Susan Highsmith. She is an author, educator, and counselor, and a just all around lovely human being. I'm so grateful that you are able to be here today, Susan, and
Thank you.
share some of your wisdom with our listeners. Thank you so much for being here.
You are so welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to the Prepared for Parenthood podcast today. I hope you found this episode educational, informational, and conversational, and that you'll join me again for another episode soon. If you enjoyed listening to today's podcast, I'd very much appreciate if you would rate, review, and subscribe. If you're interested in more information related to today's podcast or are looking for parent coaching or courses, you can find my information in the show notes or online at preparedforparenthood.com.